There had been no warning, even though China has long been looking down the barrel of a tectonic gun. India, once a lone giant island, has been grinding against Asia for 50 million years, thrusting up the Himalayas and shattering the lands in its way, especially the vast expanse of China. Alarmingly, post-quake research showed that the quake may have actually increased the likelihood of future catastrophes by ramping up the stress on neighboring faults.
It really showed us there's a lot of things that we do not know and cannot predict about the environment. It was known that there was a fault there, but if a fault erupts every several thousand years or millions of years, then how are you going to predict the next time that it's going to happen?
In the wake of Sichuan, earthquake prediction, the holy grail of geology, has become an even more urgent worldwide mission. One intriguing theory came from Taiwan, where researchers have found that almost all quakes on the ground are preceded by electrical disturbances in the atmosphere. Apparently, when rocks are compressed before a quake, they act like batteries, producing electricity. Scientists hope to design an early warning system based on this remarkable phenomenon. Another breakthrough comes from a famous quake zone half a world away, Southern California. Here, geologists inserted seismometers and sensors into several holes drilled half a mile deep into the San Andreas Fault. For the first time, these instruments recorded stress-induced changes in rocks, hours before tremors could be felt along an active section of the fault line. And there's a lot at stake for the residents of the most populous region in the United States. In November, the U.S. Geological Survey released a frightening projection of the destruction a 7.8 magnitude earthquake would inflict upon the California coast, killing 1,800, injuring 50,000, and causing upwards of $200 billion in damage. This is not idle speculation. New calculations indicate a 99% chance of an earthquake of 6.7 magnitude or greater occurring in California in the next few decades. Earthquakes, of course, are not the only violent hallmarks of a restless planet with a roiling red heart. In 2008, 64 volcanoes erupted worldwide. There's a great deal at stake. 1/10 of the Earth's population lives in the shadow of the world's 1,500 active volcanoes. Predicting exactly when an eruption will occur has always been a bit of a guessing game. But now, University of Pittsburgh scientists may be on the way to cracking the code. Using NASA satellite images, they can spot the first signs that the active volcanoes are heating up. Then it's time to take the volcano's picture up close and in living color. Before a volcano erupts, hot magma rises toward the surface, lighting up a mountain on infrared imaging, as with this amazing picture of the infamous Krakatoa. But the real breakthrough came with a volcano in far eastern Russia. Its color portrait led the scientists to predict the eruption 6 days before it happened. 6 days can save a lot of lives. Volcanoes are killers, but we may owe our lives, all life in fact, to them. Thanks to this spectacular phenomenon, volcanic lightning. Last year, after a 9,000-year slumber, the Chaitén volcano in Chile woke up with a bang. And the light show. Toxic ash and dust ionize particles in the air, which ignites an electrical storm. This may have been the spark that lit up the Earth's primordial soup with the chemicals of life. Not all volcanoes generate lightning. Simple lava flows are not enough. You need the smoke and ash. Chaitén's temper tantrum hurled tons of ash and gas, nearly 10 miles into the air. The plumes, as seen from space, reached far across South America and into the southern Atlantic. Though the smoke made the air difficult to breathe, contaminated well water, and smothered crops and farmland in the area, some scientists believed there might actually be a benefit.
In the past, we talked about sort of the phenomenon known as global cooling, where we thought we might have so much dust and pollution in the atmosphere that the temperature of planet Earth would go down.
But it appears that Chai-10 is throwing the wrong kind of particles into the air. Samples from downwind showed that the eruption was low in sulfur. The smoke and ash of the Chai-10 eruption highlighted an important concern. What threat do these volcanic discharges pose to nearby populations? 7,000 miles away, in Paradise, intrepid scientists decided to try to answer that question. Hawaii's most famous volcano, Kilauea, erupted with a startling blast of gas and ash that forced the evacuation of 2,000 tourists and scientists. Despite the hostile environment, researchers decided it was time to test the noxious air of an erupting volcano at the source. Using sensitive instruments suspended from state-of-the-art balloons, scientists Adam Durant and Matt Watson managed to launch their equipment directly over the volcano's roiling crater. Even wearing protective gear, they could spend only a few minutes at the site. Any longer, and they risked exposure to potentially fatal concentrations of sulfur dioxide gas. The balloons were piloted remotely by satellite link, using a flight trajectory visualization system that incorporated Google Earth. The team retrieved the balloon 40 miles from the launch point.
I found it.
For the first time, scientists were able to directly measure the evolution of gases being produced by the volcano using a balloon-based system. They found that, even hours after emission, potentially hazardous concentrations of gases could be detected in nearby residential communities downwind from the volcano. But fortunately, the gases dissipate quickly as they move away from the source. Of the world's active volcanoes, Kilauea is a relatively gentle and predictable one. But scientists now know that volcanic time bombs lurk under some of the most beautiful places on Earth, like Yellowstone National Park. Few tourists are aware that the famous spouting geysers only hint at a smoldering monster deep beneath the surface. A supervolcano. Instead of a cone, supervolcanoes have a circular caldera where magma and earth have been sucked inward during an eruption. The last time Yellowstone exploded, some 600,000 years ago, it blanketed half of the US in ash and wiped out thousands of species. Some say it's overdue to go off. But last year, geologists managed to take the volcano's temperature, and it's far cooler than expected. Yellowstone's hot spot of magma may be cut off from its supply at the Earth's core, and we can breathe a sigh of relief. But 2008 was not a year in which many could breathe easier. When the Earth beneath our feet was not shifting and exploding, our seas and skies rampaged. Researchers announced that natural disasters have doubled in the past 2 decades. Is the Earth really becoming more dangerous to its inhabitants? And is it our fault? While debate continued, science took us ever closer to understanding how and why the skies rage. "2008 brought one of the most heartbreaking days in meteorological history. On May 2nd, the devastating winds of Cyclone Nargis stormed ashore and slammed the impoverished nation of Myanmar to its knees. Official reports estimate that nearly 130,000 people perished in the monster storm.
The thing about that part of the world is that there's a lot of very low-lying populations that are very vulnerable. When you get something of that scale coming through, it has that much more damage.
It was one of the most devastating cyclones of all time. The deadly toll of bad weather in 2008 had only begun. Typhoons and their Atlantic cousins, hurricanes, devastated coastlines around the world. Hurricane Ike, the most damaging of the 2008 hurricanes, actually reshaped the coast of Texas, swallowing small islands that once dotted the coastline. But people will continue to build and rebuild in areas that bear the brunt of large storm systems. So scientists at the University of Florida undertook an innovative step in the quest to make homes more resilient to cyclones and hurricanes. In 2008, they put a groundbreaking portable hurricane simulator to the test, pushing the limits of the next generation of building materials and structures. With its 2,800 horsepower, the machine can replicate the 125-mile-per-hour winds and rain recorded by the researchers from the heart of recent hurricanes, reproducing them under controlled conditions. So far, they've discovered that what may be good for a wood frame wall may be the worst possible choice for a concrete block stucco structure. They're testing a variety of wall and window structures to help scientists and engineers shore up our defenses against future storms. Hurricane research in 2008 wasn't only about their awesome power of destruction. New insights about their unexpected birthplace came from a surprising source, half a world away, on the far side of Africa. Continuing research last year found that 90% of Atlantic hurricanes were preceded by lightning storms over the highlands of East Africa in Ethiopia. The chaotic weather that produces the intense lightning interrupts the path of trade winds, fragmenting them into unstable eddies.
The dynamics of this is quite interesting, because it seems that the lightning storms create disturbances in the troposphere. And these disturbances can travel a long distance, sort of for thousands of miles. And when they hit the Atlantic, they can be a source for a hurricane development. If we actually see this correlation, we can actually try and predict when a hurricane is coming, maybe 7 or 8 days before it actually starts to fall.
But we've also discovered that the vast interior of Africa may stifle as well as stimulate the birth of killer storms. All that bad weather has to pass over the Sahara, source of the biggest dust storms in the world.
Part of the hurricane formation is caused by the sea temperature rising. But if you have lots of dust in the atmosphere, it reflects more sunlight energy out into space, and so the sea temperature remains lower. So if you have a low temperature and lots of dust in the atmosphere, perhaps hurricanes are less likely to form.
All of that dust also helps fertilize the Atlantic Ocean, as far away as Florida and the Amazon. The 2008 Atlantic hurricane season was the fourth most active and second most destructive on record, with a total of 17 storms. Yet a whole different kind of weather dynamo was getting ready to shatter its own records, generating well over 100 storms in a single day. February 5th, 2008, across the United States, 131 separate tornadoes touched down.
There goes, look at the house! Oh my God!
57 people were killed
Is there anybody else in there with you?
in the most destructive outbreak of tornadoes that the U.S. had seen in nearly 20 years.
Oh, there's a roof! Roof! Oh my Jesus, Lord!
But the horrific storms that day gave scientists a chance to test a brand new theory. Researchers have found an extraordinary new link in explaining how a thunderstorm can quickly spin into a tornado The gravity wave. Throw a pebble into a pond, and waves, gravity waves, ripple out. The same thing happens in the atmosphere when something disturbs the air up or down, or side to side. The motion of these gravity waves can put the squeeze on a rotating thunderstorm, compressing it and causing it to spin faster. Scientists believe that by tracking these waves, they can eventually pinpoint when thunderstorms are likely to turn into a deadly twister. " 2008 was a year in which we moved closer to understanding how to predict the violent moods of Mother Earth on both land and in the skies. But the oceans would reveal a resilience that no one could have predicted. A discovery in the calm waters of the South Pacific, where once there was utter calamity. This idyllic refuge is known as Bikini Atoll, part of the Marshall Islands. An atoll is a ring of ancient coral reefs that are left behind when an island sinks back into the ocean. The process can take as long as 30 million years, and coral reefs are home to a quarter of the plants and animals in the world's oceans. The name bikini brings to mind two eye-popping visions.
Wake up, men. It's 1948. Here's the latest product of 50 years of evolution in fashion and form.
The bikini swimsuit, and ground zero of a series of 23 nuclear bomb tests in the 1940s and 50s.
Operation Crossroads has begun. The Bombardier Supreme test is at hand and the bomb bay door is open.
The tests assured a nation at war that its terrible new weapons worked. But the knowledge came at a great cost. There seemed little hope that the beautiful ecosystem would ever recover. For over half a century, few dared to visit the former bomb site. But in 2008, scientists decided to examine the reef in the first ever study on coral diversity since the atomic test ended. What they found was staggering and splendid. Not only had the corals returned, they were thriving, even growing from some of the ships sunk during the atomic tests. While some of the original species were still unaccounted for, 70% of the native coral species have resettled the lagoon.
What's so impressive to me about this coral reef and fish just bouncing back is really two very powerful lessons. The first is that nature is resilient. If you leave it alone, it can come back. But the other important thing about this is that not all the atolls in that chain were actually bombed. There was one that was relatively left intact. And it's from this one atoll that all that seed stock, all that life then sprang back into Bikini.
Healthy species caught a ride on strong winds and currents and drifted into the once devastated area. This is good news when more and more of the world's corals are turning white, bleaching because their colorful algae are dying.
Corals could be considered as the canary of the ocean in the same way that the canary in a coal mine is an indicator that there's trouble coming.
The canaries may be forewarning us about global warming, acidic oceans, and pollution. But we can't be certain. We simply know too little about the floors of our ocean. The last frontier on Earth. While scientists were heartened by the discoveries in the liquid oceans of the world, they worried endlessly about their frozen counterpart in the north, the Arctic ice cap. In 2008, it was predicted that the Arctic ice would retreat further than it ever has before, and that we might have an ice-free North Pole. The ice did not retreat as far as some worried, but a closer analysis revealed something equally alarming. The volume of ice did reach its lowest point in recorded history.
The really thick old ice at the moment is being washed out of the Arctic. A lot of that is disappearing, a lot of that is being pushed out into the Atlantic. There's a number of different reasons for that. Some of them are natural, but if you've got more and more thinner ice, so you've got a greater extent of thinner ice, then that ice is more likely to melt the following year, and so that's why we're getting this shrinking ice cap.
And the ice melted in such a way that, for the first time ever, the North Pole could be completely circumnavigated. New research last year also revealed that the thawing tundra might yield an even more volatile harvest. Scientists call it the carbon bomb.
Permafrost is basically frozen vegetation that hasn't decomposed and so hasn't released its carbon back out into the atmosphere. When that starts to melt, as undoubtedly it will with global warming, it's a massive store that could just be unleashed into the atmosphere.
Locked inside the eons-old permafrost is more carbon dioxide than already exists in the atmosphere. As it warms, the frozen ground could release an avalanche of the greenhouse gases, fast-forwarding us to the worst-case climate scenarios, where drought and wildfires intensify. Sea levels rise dramatically. Storms and flooding overwhelm coastal cities, wreaking havoc all around the globe. Even now, temperatures in the Arctic are rising at twice the global average. And as the climate warms here, the effects will be felt all over the globe, potentially exacerbating a crisis with our world's creatures. Hundreds of thousands of plants and animals worldwide are already threatened by overhunting, deforestation, and the encroachment by humans on their natural habitat. Now, a new study released in October of 2008 reports that 1 in 4 mammals is in danger of extinction, and 1 in 7 birds, 1/3 of amphibians, and 70% of plant life are threatened. These are shocking and distressing statistics. But there has been good news as well. Some of the most endangered creatures on Earth are making a comeback. And others are making our acquaintance for the first time. Not all that long ago, the spellbinding acrobatics of this magnificent creature nearly disappeared from the face of the Earth. Perhaps only 1,500 humpback whales remained in 1966, when commercial hunting was banned. Even with the ban, some thought they would never recover. Last year, scientists recorded humpback whale song only a few miles from New York Harbor as the creatures make the migration from Florida to Maine. And a new regulation limiting the speed of ships within 20 miles offshore during migratory season should help prevent collisions with the mighty beasts.
Truth of the matter is, you can lose species and the whole planet is not going to unravel. The problem is we don't know how many we can lose before the planet unravels. So we're playing a really dangerous game when we lose species one at a time, because we don't know. We don't really know when we're going to cross thresholds.
But what do you do when conservation is not enough? Now, scientists are hoping to achieve the seemingly impossible: to resurrect an extinct species from the dead. Yale scientists working in the Galapagos may have found a way to do it. They discovered genes from an extinct species of tortoise amongst nearby populations of similar animals. Probably the result of interbreeding, when pirates and sailors released the animals after using them as ballast. The researchers believe that with careful breeding, it might be possible to isolate and recombine the genes of the extinct species once again, essentially bringing the tortoise back from the dead.
When Darwin went and saw these tortoises in the Galapagos and he proposed the theory of natural selection, we didn't know about genetics back then. And now it turns out that it's genetics that is going to save one of the things that he saw. It's just awesome payback in some ways, in a most positive way.
It was a hunger for soup and mindless killing that brought the great beasts of the Galapagos to the brink of extinction. Those same hungers have crashed the populations of many of the world's species of shark. Last year, weirdly enough, they seemed to be striking back. Despite their drastically reduced numbers around the world, sharks took a bite out of the headlines in 2008 with a rash of attacks along Mexican shores. Remarkable proof of an interspecies vendetta? Not likely. Instead, researchers believe that increased attacks were the result of La Niña, El Niño's chilly sibling, which brought cooler waters closer to the shore. Chasing after the colder currents, sharks followed closely behind, smack into busy beaches and coastal waters. With La Niña on the wane by the end of the year, it remains to be seen if the sharks will retreat with the cooler water. Though 2008 marked the terrible passing of some species into oblivion, it was also a banner year for the discovery of others. Usually, new species come from secluded places where the human footprint has yet to be felt. But sometimes, they're right under our noses. And that was exactly the case last August, when scientists conducting the census of marine life in Australia's Great Barrier Reef cited hundreds of new species. They range from corals to crustaceans to fan worms. Divers even found a stingerless jellyfish, sea-dwelling earthworms, and a tongue-eating fish parasite. The incredible diversity of these creatures indicates that there are still many more discoveries to be made. In fact, it was a banner year for the discovery of new species, in the water and on land. The colorful Brachylophus bula bula iguana was identified in Fiji. While deep in the Amazon rainforest, German biologists stumbled across a freakish new species of ant. This blind underground predator may be a throwback to the earliest ant ancestors, and so strange that its discoverers dubbed it Martialis, from Mars. And in Indonesia, a team of anthropologists has discovered a group of primates not seen alive in 85 years. It's the pygmy tarsier, a 2-ounce living Furby. One wildlife discovery last year grabbed headlines the world over. Not the cataloging of a new species, but new hope for an old friend, the gorilla. Gorillas are divided into two species. The eastern gorilla, which includes the famed mountain gorilla, and the western gorilla, such as the western lowland gorilla. There are fewer than 700 of the mountain gorillas. But even the lowland gorillas have been steadily declining in numbers for the last 2 decades. Early in 2008, the head count numbered around 50,000. But a fortuitous discovery deep in an isolated swamp of the Congo changed everything. Researchers from the Wildlife Conservation Society located a previously unknown population of 125,000 of the majestic creatures, more than tripling the known population. Isolated from the influence of humans living nearby, the hidden gorillas have thrived undetected for decades.
You so rarely hear that kind of hopeful, positive message that scientists have just opened the door and peeked in there and seen the surprise. You know, occasionally nature gives us a do-over, and I think in this case we just got one. I just hope we don't, we treat it well. So long as we can put some measures in place that can safeguard these gorillas going into the future, I think we could have the greatest primate conservation area on the planet.
The Congolese government promises to set aside a new parcel of land as a protected sanctuary, bolstering hopes that the peaceful animals will be with us for many years to come. As wildlife habitats across Africa are shrinking due to global warming and human pressures, it was a cheering reminder that there are parts of the world we have yet to cut down, burn, and drain. But humans themselves are not immune to habitat loss and climate change, as stark images from the deserts of Niger recently revealed. In 2008, paleontologist Paul Sereno announced a remarkable find from the Sahara, where he had been looking for dinosaur bones. He found bones all right, but not the kind he was looking for. Sereno had literally stumbled upon the largest known graveyard of Stone Age people, including this mother, buried with her 2 children. 12,000 years ago, this skull-bleaching desert had been a lush, green lakeside oasis, supporting a thriving culture and an abundance of wild game. Then the Earth's axis wobbled ever so slightly. The climate changed, the desert spread, and the culture died. Today, it is mainly human activity that causes the African deserts to spread. Overgrazing, slash-and-burn agriculture, deforestation, and overuse of groundwater are exacerbating climate change. If current trends continue, the continent might be able to feed only 25% of its population by 2025.
Change is part of our history. It's certainly going to be part of our future. And it's really incumbent upon us, for our own survival or success as a species, to be able to anticipate and adapt to those changes.
And modern man is far from safe. Millions of the world's poorest populations in 2008 suffered severe food shortages as crops failed and food prices spiked. Widespread riots broke out in Haiti, where starving families resorted to eating mud cookies sold by vendors.
The U.S. produces a large percentage of the corn that is consumed not just here locally but worldwide. Excessive drought, excessive rainfall, any of those factors that reduce your yields will then have an influence on that particular sector of the economy, which then has a ripple effect on other parts of the agricultural economy as well.
And an insidious new threat to the world's food supply is on the rise, a potentially disastrous disease. It's a wheat virus. Previously found only in East Africa, it is spread as far as Iran and threatens to push out into India and the rest of Asia. Such plagues could wipe out our ability to grow food on a large scale. It is with this in mind that scientists in Norway last year completed a new safeguard, the Doomsday Seed Vault. Buried deep into the side of an Arctic mountain, the new vault will house copies of seeds from all known varieties of food crops, keeping them in case they are needed to save a starving planet. But short of such a crisis, the human population showed no signs of shrinking in 2008, growing to an estimated 6.7 billion. Fortunately, human ingenuity is showing signs of expanding as quickly as our numbers. And in 2008, many of our greatest breakthroughs came as we grappled with ways to limit our impact on our Earth and survive. Last year marked a crucial tipping point in our evolving relationship with the Earth. For the first time in history, more than half of all the world's people live in or near a city. In a geologic blink of an eye, we've gone from small bands of hunter-gatherers to farmers working the countryside to overwhelming masses concentrated in our newest environment, the urban jungle. In 2008, innovative thinking for the city of the future gave birth to some exciting new ideas. The hot topic of the year, the vertical farm. Architects and urban planners imagine towering skyscrapers that will be self-contained centers of food production, with a footprint of only 1 acre, while producing enough food to feed 50,000. The future is here for the United Arab Emirates, as architects broke ground in Abu Dhabi on their revolutionary new project called Masdar. It will be the world's first car-free, zero-waste, zero-carbon emission city. The Masdar project is designed for a future population of 47,000. These days, it seems that everyone is racing to harness new, clean, renewable sources of energy, and some are turning to water. Scientists have long known that the ocean's powerful waves can generate energy.
Yeah, that's a better picture.
But now, University of Michigan researchers have figured out how to tap into water that takes things at a lazier pace, inspired by fish. Most of the world's water moves at a leisurely mile per hour or less, too little to push a turbine. The Vivace system, on the other hand, is made up of a series of tubes that create turbulence, eddies in slow-moving water. These cause the tubes to bob up and down in ways that can generate electricity. Using the secret of how fish keep up with each other, riding the turbulent wake of the fish in front of them. With so much slow water in the world, scientists believe that Vivace's system could eventually support the needs of 15 billion people.